ठीक है. Hafiz bhai, with your permission, we can start.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let me share my screen again. We can go back, and I will start this as a slideshow. Okay, a very warm welcome to all our guests today. We greet in our own traditional way of saying Assalamu alaikum, which is greetings of peace, and a very good morning on a Sunday. So we are gathered here to talk about a very important topic that affects pretty much every life around us. There are so many people who are affected by some of these conditions. We have the pleasure of having Dr. Hafiz Rehman, who is here to talk about this topic. Just very briefly, Dr. Hafiz is a board-certified internal medicine physician in private practice in Amsterdam, New York. He has over 24 years of experience. His area of interest lies in treating diabetes, obesity, and all other related metabolic disorders. He has helped hundreds of patients achieve a healthy weight and support weight maintenance via methodical dietary management and therapeutic interventions. His passion is to help as many people as possible. And just to add a little bit more flavor to that introduction, Dr. Hafiz is also very acutely involved in humanitarian services with nonprofit organizations like Humanity First. He does a lot of tours to developing countries such as Mexico and others to do pro bono operations and pro bono services for people. So thank you so much, Dr. Hafiz, for joining us today and talking about this. So metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and obesity. So as an introduction of just for today, and this is going to be like a series that we will be doing on this topic. Dr. Hafiz will go through some slides that he has prepared on the topic. And then once we conclude this PowerPoint presentation, we will then dive into question and answer sessions. And all of our guests today are welcome to ask questions and make comments. We will greatly appreciate that. So without further ado, Dr. Hafiz, please go ahead and take the mic. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Nair, for introducing me, and it's so kind of you. Well, we know that in the Western world and practically all over the world, the humanity is suffering and suffering a lot. And my first screen that you see depicts this dilemma. As you could see on the left of the screen, there is the food industry, which is giving us a food that is not healthy, generally speaking. And on the other side, the diseases that are caused by the food industry has to be answered by therapeutics. And the right side of the screen, there is the pharmaceutical industry. And we are right in the center with our patients trying to find a way to normalcy, I guess. And that is the real topic of the discussion today. What is metabolic syndrome? What is insulin resistance, which is the key to the majority of the diseases that we find today? And then, of course, the resultant obesity. So next slide, please. So this is a little trivia for you guys. There is no marks here. It's just an interesting question for all of you to know, and just keep it in your mind. I'll give you the answer. So what is the percentage of the US population that is metabolically healthy? And if you guessed 12%, you are good. That's what it is. So that is an alarming situation that only 12% of us here in the US, and I would think with varying degrees on other parts of the world, people are, a majority of the human population right now is suffering from the metabolic ailments. And this is what we're going to discuss today. Next slide, please. No, go back to that. There was some fact that I had to mention. So let's just have one other statistics given to you guys with some interest. 30% of the US population is obese. And 20% of those obese people are, however, metabolically healthy, believe it or not. And 80% of those obese patients are not. However, interestingly, 40% of the normal weight patients are metabolically unhealthy. And yet, the audacity is that the 40% of those normal weight patients blame the 80% of the obese patients that they are the problem of the healthcare crisis. And in reality, if you measure the population of the 40% that are normal weight, that are metabolically unhealthy, they are more millions more than the obese population that is sick. So next slide, please. So this whole problem started from processed food. Food industry, on the name of feeding more people, increasing the shelf life of the food, manipulated the food to a degree where we now find ourselves in a very strange situation. And this is another trivia for you guys. What is the percentage of the processed food in the USA? Is it 62%? Is it 50%? Or is it 70%? Well, if you guessed 70%, you're correct. So that leaves us basically 30% of the food that is more or less not processed. And our target should be to chase that, because processed food is where this whole metabolic crisis lies in. Next slide. So people confuse frequently these three different sciences that have something to do with the food. So food science is, in reality, when the food is from the ground, goes to your mouth, that's food science. Nutrition is food from your mouth to the cell, and the metabolic health is the food from what happens to the food within the cell. That's the part of our discussion today. Majority of that is on this topic. In our cells, we have an energy powerhouse called mitochondria. Mitochondria deals with the nutrition, the food that comes in from the intestines through the bloodstream. And there are two main functions, burning and growth. Now, burning is good because burning provides ATP in the mitochondria, which is basically the power with which our cells function, with which our body functions, all cellular activities take place. And the other thing that mitochondria decide to do with our food is growth. But what kind of growth are we talking about? One growth is to develop the body cells, to develop tissues, and the other is the fat tissue synthesis. Fat tissue synthesis is also very important for this discussion because that is absolutely controlled by a hormone that is produced by the pancreas. It's called insulin. That is the main cause of the fat tissue synthesis, and we will explain in the later slides what that is. So in short, mitochondrial dysfunction is actually metabolic syndrome. That is the definition. Now we're going to go after this to find out what is mitochondrial dysfunction, what is obesity, where does the role of insulin happen. Let's talk about that. Let's go to the next slide. So mitochondrial dysfunction is manifested by increased fasting insulin. Now, I emphasize again, fasting insulin. And unfortunately, in America and in most parts of the world, people still are not doing a test for fasting insulin. Fasting insulin is the key test to figure out if our mitochondria are healthy or not. The goal is to keep fasting insulin down below 10 millimoles. That is the goal. That is what we want to do. And that will keep the mitochondrial function towards burning if the insulin is that down in the morning. We are talking about fasting insulin. If that is higher than 10, we are in trouble, and we will talk about this further. If you are under 10 of the fasting insulin, you are channeling majority of your food that you consumed, or nutrients, I should say, towards the ATP synthesis, which is good. Next slide, please. Now, the normal range for glucose is anywhere between 60 to 100. Some authorities indicate that 100 is just too much. Glucose spike happens after we increase any food that carries a high load of glucose. We will talk about those food elements, but glucose spike causes endothelial dysfunction, which is in reality a damage to the blood vessel leading to hypertension, heart disease, and all sorts of other troubles, and also cause insulin release from the pancreas. And that is actually what we call insulin spike. So as soon as your food hits your mouth or your mouth receives the food, the signals go to the brain. From there, the neuronal signals go down to pancreas, and a robust insulin gets released. And that is what we're talking about, people that have intact pancreatic function, where insulin production is still intact. We're talking about those patients or those people. They're not patients. Majority of them are without still a named disorder, but the insulin release happens or spike happens after the glucose spike. Now, one other factor that is a key element in this is the length of the time glucose stays elevated in your bloodstream. That is a key component for establishing insulin resistance. That means that your insulin is unable to effectively deal with the high glucose that is circulating in your bloodstream. Now remember, glucose, after being digested, after being extracted from your food, goes to the liver. Liver keeps 20% of that glucose and sends 80% of that glucose into the circulation. From there, brain, which is very rich in mitochondria because it is the most active organ in our body, that receives a great part of glucose for energy. And remember also that the brain cannot store glucose in any form, so it needs it continuously. So it takes a lot of glucose. Then your muscles take up a lot of glucose. So your muscle, your brain, then your organs take up the glucose. And for the pickup of the glucose, all cells in the body utilize glucose as an energy. They do not need insulin to take the glucose in the cells. They do not need it, other than fat cells. Now, that's very important because that's where insulin comes in and causes the movement of the glucose for fat synthesis once it is sensed that your body has an extra glucose running in the bloodstream. I hope you're following me on this, because that is the key element of understanding what happens then. So that glucose channels into fat synthesis after all that consumption that I just spoke about. Let's go to the next slide. These are the two important structures of the starches. One is a starch based on the foods that are like breads and potatoes, and this is this branched chain like a Christmas tree. The glucose from the brown vegetables, the beans and the different other green vegetables that have high fiber content, they have the chained glucose connected with each other through hydrogen bonds structured together. It is easy to detach glucose from these branches. 1-alpha-hydroxy 6 bonds are easy to break from the side of the branches than from the long chain. And as a result, these starchy carbohydrates cause a significant spike in your blood sugars compared to those that are in the chain where the glucose is packed in the chain, in the straight chain, and it takes longer time for the glucose to come out, and therefore it is good for our body. And I will discuss further as to why this is such an important thing. It is mentioned in our dietary plan as to why you should prefer to take those. Next. So here we come to the evil twin of glucose, which is fructose. Now, unfortunately, we have created sucrose, which has equal amount of fructose and glucose. Now, these are two glucose and fructose are together to make the sugar, which is called sucrose. High fructose corn syrup is 40 to 55% fructose. Why I'm emphasizing this? Because the metabolism of fructose is completely different from that of glucose. Glucose is the energy of life. Glucose is consumed by every cell in the body. In the case of fructose, however, that is not the case. Why? Because the fructose needs to go straight down to the liver, where liver has to process that. And majority of the fructose, unfortunately, therefore, gets to be made into fat as an energy for the future. So this is why it is important to keep fructose down in order for us to be healthy. And unfortunately, the processed food has much more high fructose, and as a result, the ailments that are coming as a result of that. Important to keep that in mind. Let's go next slide. Fructose is a mitochondrial toxin. Let's have that clear by two methods. It destroys the ATP synthesis in the cell, and it also causes problems by synthesizing uric acid. Everybody thinks in medical community that the uric acid is coming from purines and from proteins, but the reality is, which we will show you in the next slides, that the uric acid's great part of the uric acid is coming from fructose in our diet. This is that pathway. The AMP kinase is the real hero here, which causes the ATP synthesis, and fructose actually activates AMP deaminase, which is the evil twin of this, and obviously leading up to ATP consumption and no further ATP synthesis, thus proving to be a mitochondrial toxin, literally a poison. So when I tell my friends that certain things that are processed are sweet, are metabolic poison, it is because of this. Let's go next. Again, the same type of slide to show you guys the oxidative stress that fructose provides or creates in the mitochondria. This is that. Next slide. Now, here is this nice picture that I I found out, and food industry created this term, calories. They came up with calories to make sure that the population is confused. And then the concept, as you all remember, several years back, and still there are the insurance companies are insisting that we put people on low-calorie diet, and we have to actually put in the charts to prove that the low-calorie people are on low-calorie in order to prove that they have been working with their diet in order to get them covered for sometimes when you find it appropriate on GLP drugs to help them lose weight. This is where this concept came from. Calories are nothing for us in that sense. Why? Because our bodies don't burn calories like this, like they want to put us into. We are not a calorie meters. We are a human body which works with hormones. This is a hormonal issue. This is not a calories. And people are busy throughout their lives trying to calculate, oh, I consume that many calories, I consume this many. How is it possible to always have that calculator and all sorts of mathematical errors that happen? And this was to equate, this whole thing was to equate consumption of, for example, a natural food, which is in this case an apple, to be equated to the consumption of a donut. Donut is full of fructose, a destructive compound, and apple has fiber, it has glucose, and obviously it has some other nice nutrients, and which we'll talk further. But it's just for you guys to understand that this concept of calories is not in reality good. We could talk about portion control, but this calorie measurement for human beings was not a good idea, in my opinion. As I stepped into this field of weight loss, I realized that this was all a facade, a way to confuse people into eating any type of food, like, for example, equating even a soda to a glass of milk, which is obviously not the same. Let's go to the next. We know that we in the Western world in particular, and nowadays even in third world countries, suffering from obesity. And obviously, this is a big problem. And I have highlighted some of the causes for obesity and then the effects of obesity that it is causing to the human body. And of course, the whole society is suffering as a result of this. All these problems come from obesity as a result of abnormal tissue growth that happens under the order of insulin, which is channeling the glucose and obviously the fructose that is being channeled by the liver into fat. And this is all coming from that, all these disorders, as you could see, cancer, cardiomyopathy, gallbladder stones, CAD, dementia, depression, diabetes, dyslipidemia, GERD, gout, hypertension, infertility, polycystic ovarian disease, kidney disease, fatty liver, non-alcoholic type, sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, psychosocial problems, COVID, multiple COVID deaths took place because of the skin changes and stroke. Let's go to the next. Popular theory is to blame the human being that's suffering. That's at the end. This is what it is. We say obesity, have been saying, because we need to blame somebody, because we would not dare blame the cause of the problem. We would blame those poor people that have suffered as a result of the consumption of those bad stuff. Obesity is not a medical condition, but a psychological character, a defect, low willpower, and also the obesity pandemic was a collective loss of willpower, not a failure. All this is a BS, I would say, pardon my expression for the lack of better term. That is wrong to say. These people are suffering. Obesity myths, it's caused by your genes, it's caused by the lack of willpower, it's caused by the lack of exercise. Absolutely not correct. It is a hormonal problem, not a caloric imbalance. we need to have that clear. Let's go next. Again, similar type of thinking. Newer thinking now says that it is the fructose that is the real thing, and the high sugar and the processed foods that are creating problems for fat storage and metabolic disorder, not the old thinking which used to think that you eat more and you exercise less, and that creates excess calories, and then you obviously have the problem of ATP consumption more, and then you just, obviously are, obese because of that. Obviously, that is far, far from truth. And this is what we need to debunk to help people. Here we have dysregulated energy balance, which is central to obesity. And we got to understand these hormones that, as we will be talking about them, these guys are your friends, the leptin, the GLP, CCK, PYY. These hormones all help us overcome the metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance. Insulin is, of course, a synthesizer or a cause of fat deposits. Ghrelin is also a cause of eating, even sometime when we're not hungry. By the way, if you don't sleep enough hours, ghrelin gets released. It goes to your brain and tells your brain to send the signals for you to eat, and you end up eating. And it's actually, that's why one of our recommendations for this is to make sure that you sleep at least 7 hours to keep this ghrelin down. So these hormones, the GLP, CCK, PYY, and leptin, are inactive so long insulin is running. If insulin spikes, insulin persists and plateaus and stays a long time in your body trying to deal with the high glucose spike and subsequent resistance problem, these leptin and these hormones are silenced, and as a result, you're not able to channel your body towards burning of ketones as an energy source, which is the key to reversal of the metabolic syndrome. Next slide. Insulin blocks leptin signaling in the brain. Important to know, and we have talked about it. Leptin corrects cognitive defects in patients with leptin deficiency. Problem is there is a term leptin resistance as well, where too much obese tissue, too much insulin running in your body causes leptin to also be resistant. And as a result, we suffer even more further down. Go next one, please. These are important. Yes, here. These are important. These are okay. These are important organs or tissues that are for us for our discussion today. This nucleus accumbens is a hypothalamus area, which deals with the hunger signals. It also has the pleasure signals there, the dopamine and serotonin. So it is important to understand what this is. It signals when we are hungry, when we are full. Because of its pleasure center, fructose attacks this area and completely behaves as if we are addicted to cocaine or to that of other drugs. It's just the same way. It has that kind of effect on the brain. And that's why it is very important to get rid of fructose from our diet, because it kind of activates dopamine-associated receptors there, which is pure pleasure-seeking and no balance, which was provided by serotonin. Important to understand. Liver is an important organ which, as you know, deals with fructose primarily because the only organ that can deal with it practically. And of course, glucose and fats and everything. So healthy liver is very important for us. Our intestines harbor or carry 100 trillion bacteria, which need to be healthy. So they are part of our body. Our mitochondria are refurbished bacteria. So if our intestinal microbes are not healthy, we are in absolute trouble. And there is a link with all these organs with each other as the signals go around. Muscles, of course, as we age or when women go through menopause, they lose those hormones. And as a result, muscle loss causes more fat deposits, unfortunately. And sarcopenia is the term. So we got to find a way to reverse that. And how do you reverse that? That you do by doing weight-based exercises, by walking, by doing everything in your power to keep yourself moving. And like I said, weight-based exercise also triggers more muscles to be active. And pancreas, of course, because pancreas produces insulin and along with other digestive juices. There is a possibility of pancreas receiving fat in it also and becoming resistant as well, which is unfortunate consequences of the insulin resistance. Next slide. So this is again about the fructose causing liver mitochondrial problems. We would, for the sake of time, pass through to the next one. This is highlighting that the fructose causes problem. We will briefly talk about what is the most deposited type of fat in the body. Those are triglycerides. Triglycerides come from 3 fatty acids, which are right in the center here, and they combine with glycerol to make triglycerides. That's what the name says. Now, you do not form, or we do not form the triglycerides unless we have this compound. And who provides this compound? Sugar, glucose, and fructose. So glycerol. So every time, if you find a patient, if you're a clinician, please look for triglycerides. If they're over 150, that is one signal of a metabolic disorder. You gotta trace it back to the glucose, and you gotta fix it as a clinician because your patient has showing signs and symptoms of eventual diabetes, insulin resistance, which is the precursor to the diabetes eventually. Next slide. This slide gives us 3 different fat depots in our body. Now, the subcutaneous fat, as you could see, is around, which is what everyone loathes, but it is the most metabolically inactive, I should say. Maybe that might not be the correct term, but metabolically less dangerous, that would be a better term. Up to 22 pounds of the fat in the subcutaneous fat can be okay for the body and not create any inflammatory cytokines. So it is the fat that's on the butts, it's on the back of the neck, it is on the thighs, and most people don't want it. They are running around to try to get them surgically corrected, but this is the least dangerous of these 3 depots that we're going to talk about. The second is visceral fat, which is obviously around your organs. This is far more dangerous. Actually, one indicator of the metabolic disorder is waist circumference. For men, if it is 40, or for women, if it is over 35, you have a clear signal, which is a poor man's test. You could do it with your tape, measure that. That would indicate that you have a metabolic disorder because you have more visceral fat. This visceral fat have to be just 5 pounds before it starts producing inflammatory cytokines in your body that create havoc in your body. And last but not the least, liver, which lays fat within the liver itself. But in this case, liver has only a very limited capacity to hold fat. It can only hold half a pound of the fat before it becomes dangerous for us. It starts secreting inflammatory cytokines, which are very dangerous for us. By the way, after the liver gets filled with the fat, it gives sacrifice of itself being inundated with fat. Then one of the very first organ to receive the fat as a distribution throughout the body is the back of your tongue. So back of your tongue is fatty and it receives a lot of fat. It closes your throat and thus becomes a reason for sleep apnea. One of the reasons, obviously, other reasons are several others that these are beyond, obviously, for this talk today, but to keep that. This is also a concept of de novo lipogenesis in the liver, how that is created, a small picture of this, how liver keeps making this fat and keeps transporting it. For you to remember, triglycerides are the deposited fat. VLDL is triglyceride. It is carried in the VLDL. And these all fat tests that we order are evolution of one another, but the story starts right here at triglycerides. Glycerol mixing with the 3 fatty acids to make triglycerides, which is a stored form of fat. Let's go next. So the uric acid, as we talk, which is a mitochondrial toxin, metabolism is a large part of the uric acid oversynthesis or synthesis. But look at this, fructose, a great part, much greater part than high purine foods, which we used to think that that was the reason why you should avoid meats and the seafood that causes uric acid. Of course, if you have susceptibility, you should avoid, but the biggest culprit is this guy here, right here, fructose. So we need to make sure that the fructose is less. Uric acid, by the way, causes reduction in the nitrous oxide in your blood vessels and causes hypertension. That's why it is one of the leading cause of hypertension and also erectile dysfunction in male. Let's go next. Now we're going to talk quickly about, there are 7 different types of fats in the food, and they're all important except one, the last one, which is trans fats, which is the evil. It is dangerous. It needs to be avoided. Fortunately, the government has stepped in and trans fats have been eliminated from the diet, but unfortunately, they were clever enough to convince the government that if they are under 0.49 percentage point in the food, they could put trans fats because, of course, trans fats increase the shelf life of the food, and this is what they want. So if you consume a lot of processed foods, the packaged food, and you could easily create a lot of trans fats, enough to kill you, basically. The top one are omega-3 fatty acids, which are EPA, DHA, ALA. These are good guys, anti-inflammatory. They are heart healthy. The thing is that ALA is, you could get it from vegetarian diet, but the ALA conversion to DHA and EPA is very, very minimal. As a result, you need to replenish your body with these EPA and DHA through a good source of fish, but not the fish that's raised in the farms, because that fish eats corn, and the corn has ALA, but not these two. So it is very important to have deep sea food, fish as the source of these two. And the fish is not the one that's carrying, by the way. Fish eats algae and process it, and then we consume fish to get this EPA and DHA. So we get it on third hand. Now, vegetarian, of course, cannot convert this ALA to EPA and DHA. That's why it is important to know. But to get a good source of these fatty fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids, is very difficult and daunting task. We could talk some other time about it. Let's go back to the same slide. Back one. Yeah. Omega-6 fatty acid, very quickly, they're in seed oils. They're pro-inflammatory, not good for you. Stay away from them. Medium chain fatty acids, coconut oil, it has a high temperature for tolerance, so things can be cooked in it, but too high temperature would convert it into trans fat, so avoid it for too much consumption of these. Monounsaturated fatty acids, olive oil, the best of these oils, but this oil should be consumed not in ideal situation, not cooked, but rather raw, the way it is in your salads, or just plain taking it orally. that's better than cooking it because it has a low melting point from which it can break those bonds and convert it into trans fat. So you might be thinking that you are cooking in a healthy oil, but 360-degree temperature is the one that's the top limit for this. And then its bonds break and it converts it into trans fats, which is not good for us. Polyunsaturated fatty acids are soybean and canola oil. They're okay, again, the same way like the coconut oil, not too much. We will spend some time with saturated fats. There are two sorts, dairy and meat. There were a lot of wrong information given to population about these. Meat saturated fats are at least neutral to the body. They do not create problems that we have known to have received from the media and from experts, so-called experts. And the dairy fat is actually good for you if you can handle it. If you're not lactose intolerant, they are good for you. They are cardioprotective to some degree. Here briefly, carbohydrates go in the liver, excess carbohydrates, they get converted into triglycerides. Triglycerides get transported via VLDL. When VLDL offloads the triglycerides in the fat tissue and rest of the body, they are the one who become small LDL particles. These are the atherogenic. These are the most dangerous cholesterol, which statins, by the way, do not touch. So we are treating large particle LDL by statins, which is the 80% of the total LDL cholesterol, which is neutral to our health, is not dangerous. And unfortunately, we chase that one to try to attempt to bring down the small LDL, which you cannot do that. That happens only with better food, and that happens only with exercise. So keep that in mind. And once the small LDL gets delivered, then the rest is left with this highly protein mass transport, which is HDL, and that goes back to recycling in the liver. That's why HDL is considered a better cholesterol, because it doesn't have too much cholesterol in it. It has more proteins, carrier proteins. But remember the small LDL. We target that if you have more than, that's why we recommend ordering NMR profile, which has the breakdown of all these different type of lipids, because we are chasing this small LDL to be under 1,000. If they're over 1,000, you need to treat it, but obviously treatment has to be with the consultation with your physician. Next. We're going to talk briefly about milk. Many people loathe milk for unknown reason. Why? We don't know. 20% of the population has some sort of protein allergy or lactose intolerance. Of course, without them, other than that, 80% can consume it. And I recommend, if you're consuming milk, do whole milk-based yogurt, whole milk-based the milk also, because the real stuff is in there. As we talked about, good fats are there. They also have amino acids and good fatty acids. Do not count with calcium in the milk, because that calcium does not get absorbed because of the higher phosphorus amount in the milk that renders calcium to be wasted. So you do not absorb calcium when you're consuming milk. You're doing it only for essential amino acids and for fatty acids. Let's go to the next slide. These are the protective mechanisms in your intestines that keep the bug away from the intestines getting into your circulation, causing inflammation in your body. These are tight junctions, mucin layer, and immunological layer that protects you. These three layers protects you from bacteria getting from the intestines into the bloodstream. And that's why there's a term that's coined leaky gut syndrome, that when you do not feed your bacteria with proper food, your bacteria would feed on the mucin layer of your intestine, creating a gap in there in the tight junctions, causing the bacteria to travel towards your bloodstream and causing inflammation in your body, a leading cause of chronic inflammation in the body that has many fold problems. Therefore, it is important. What is the food of the bacteria? Fiber. And the food industry has removed fiber from the diet. And as a result, Why they remove the fiber? Because if they keep the fiber in, food cannot be kept in for a long time, and that's the dilemma. Fiber is needed for our bacteria. We cannot digest it, but our bacteria do. And remember, our bacteria are part of us. They are the one who provide the mitochondria. They are the one who provide hormonal signals. If you don't keep them healthy, you would not be healthy. Next. Nayyar Bhai, how much time have I spoken?
So far about 45 minutes.
So I will talk about these two things, and then we could go on questions because we still have a lot of material, but we could. So I have finally come up with, and I've been dealing with this weight loss and this metabolic crisis because in my own practice, I have more diabetics than an endocrinologist in this area. And I was wondering why they are becoming diabetic, why they are so obese, what's the reason? And when I searched it, and I myself was overweight back on those days, I said, no, I got to find a way to deal with this. And then I came up with these suggestions that are not ideal, but they are practical. And they work because I have lived with these guidelines myself. And thank God I've kept myself in reasonable condition. I have done the blood test to prove that also that I've written there that this particular suggestion works. Feel free to look for them. So the main idea is to reduce insulin and to increase the leptin activity. This leptin is the key because it causes the fat to burn in your body that's deposited. Without leptin, you can't burn it. Control the carbohydrates, prioritize the proteins, and do not fear fats, the good fats we're talking, not trans fats. Protect your liver and feed your gut with the fiber, otherwise you'll be in trouble. Food don'ts and do's are written here, where, as you could see, I've written fruits without any limit as to what kind of fruits you can take. Of course, limit is there that fruits have natural fiber in it, and you cannot eat too much fruit before your body will swell because the fiber will go in the stomach and cause swelling, and you would not be able to eat too much. Likewise, vegetables, eggs are heavy with proteins and fats, good stuff for you. The nuts are good for you. Water, obviously, is source of life. Proteins, I recommend grass-fed. I will explain you later in the slide very quickly why I'm saying this, but the meats are very important. Sugarless coffee, otherwise you could put a type of natural sugar that I found out called allulose, which is better than the others. It is just comparative sense that we're talking about. Greek yogurt, which is whole milk base, that has a high protein. I've found a Greek yogurt in Whole Foods that has 20 grams of protein per serving. A great food, it is called Nancy's, but it is whole milk based. This low fat and the 2% is garbage unless you have lactose problem. That's a different story. Whole milk based stuff that we want to buy. The soups are fine, organic cheese, teas, a local honey to boost your immune, but not too much honey. The butter is good. Cooking in the butter is also good, and the ghee is very good for these two because they don't break in high temperature. So you could prepare your food on that without any fear of converting butter or ghee into a trans fat. Organic couscous and oats and olive oil and sweet potatoes and organic peanut butter. Don'ts are no rice, pasta, bread, pork. Pork has high triglycerides. This stuff is bad for you. Bread, pasta, rice, they're refined. They are those starches that we talked about on the top of this presentation. Branched, like the Christmas tree starches where glucose easily gets out and creates problem. Added sugar is not good for you. Processed foods, candies, cookies, not good for you. Cakes, fries, high fructose corn syrup-based food, not good for you. Maple syrup, not good. Jams, jellies, they add a lot of things and are not good for you. Branched amino acids, valine, leucine, or isoleucine. Now, this I have written as don'ts, but if you are weightlifting or if you're going to gym, you could consume those because they will help you build muscle. But leucine is an independent source of insulin release. So remember that this is a protein, one of the only essential proteins that causes release of insulin from pancreas. Otherwise, majority of the insulin comes from the carbohydrates. General suggestion, do your exercises, weight-based exercise, very important. Wear elbow and knee braces to avoid injuries. I do that. Why? Because people mostly are not used to exercise and they break their elbows and knees or hurt them, and then they're out of commission for weeks in and out. So wear those to avoid it, and you'll see it'll help you. The message is foods that cannot be recognized in its original state are considered processed and should be avoided. I give you an example. An apple is an apple. It came from a tree. If you cut it, it has pieces. That still is apple. If you mash it in your own hand, that is still, you could see it's coming from apple. But if you make an apple pie, that's processed, avoid it. Then I recommend 14 hours intermittent fasts between the dinner and the breakfast. So after you consume dinner and go to the bed, have 4 hours gap at least, and then have this total 14 hours. Why? Because otherwise you would never be able to burn the fat that's sitting in your body, despite doing all other things. If you don't do the 14 hours minimum, from there you could increase to 15, 16, and as much as you can, all the way to 16, 17, 18 hours. That's good, because after 12 hours, your body gets totally done with the glycogen, which was stored by the liver for ready-made glucose. Then you start burning fat, which is ketones, for energy. And so that is, so intermittent fasting helps also to keep your insulin down. Next. These are some tests that I've ordered, suggested tests. I have unfortunately no time to go one by one, but these are the metabolic tests that we order in order to diagnose a patient with a metabolic disorder. As you could see, these are 19 important tests. You have any one of them wrong, there is something wrong going on. Some of them are inflammatory markers. Some of them are those hormones that are for fat burning. Some of them are pro-inflammatory. Some of them are like cortisol based, and we need to make sure that the cortisol is not in the game, because cortisol in excess is caused by the stress, and it slows down the metabolic rate and creates problems. FSH and LH in women in menopause is important, because from there we could figure out that you are now not going to make more muscles and you're going to lay more fat, and we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. Next slide, please. These are some stages of the fasting. As you could see on the 4th stage, you start with ketosis, and that's why the 14 hours is important. Next one. Benefits of fasting. As you could see, multiple benefits. Next one. Our take-home message is eliminate consuming processed foods. Saturated fats are not bad. Avoid seed oils and trans fats. Do the high-intensity training exercises, and do not outsource your health. Next one. These are where the GLPs, my favorite topic. What do they do? Look at this, the vast implication of the GLP and the GLP agonists. And that's why no wonder many of them are now considered good for our health if they are indicated. But the GLP is a natural compound that our intestines produce, and their effect is, as you can see, all over the body. And that's why the GLP drugs work on many of these areas, trying to reverse the metabolic disorder, which is the key to this whole problem. Again, the same type of slide. Go ahead. Now, these are some foods that I eat myself every day to give you suggestions. First is a chicken. Second is an egg made with some vegetables, just like scrambled eggs. And this is quinoa, my favorite, which I replaced with the rice. Next. Now, here is an interesting thing. This right side meat is metabolically sick meat. You see all these marbles? This is in the muscles fat. You're consuming a corn-fed animal that has this fat in it. And as a result, you are consuming that kind of troublesome, sick animal, metabolically sick animal. And on the other side is the corn-fed, the grass-fed animal. You could see very minimal fat and more healthier protein choice. If you cannot get it, just you could just basically eat, but make sure that you understand this. So to highlight it. Next, this is, I was doing a barbecue. I came up with an idea. I found a turnip. a big turnip. I made the patty out of this, and then I put the beef in it and cheese, and I made this to just show you guys. Next. This is my son made a pizza. Of course, I'm not pro pizza, but it was totally homemade from the scratch. Minimum amount probably wouldn't hurt if it is known that where it is coming from. And of course, dough needs to be thin crust in order to avoid eating too much those starches. Next. Mediterranean food idea, a nice picture to show you guys. Next. This is a saying of one of the famous caliphs of Muslim history. He was fourth caliph to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said once that other than honey, every sweet thing is a poison. And the poison, every bitter thing, other than the poison, every bitter thing has cure in it. Just, I put it there to kind of highlight it. This is another idea. I was in my favorite country, Dominican Republic, and I ordered this lively salad, as you could see, filled with fruits, the spinach and cheese, and I didn't touch this thing. Fructose and allulose chemically very similar, but this guy behaves completely differently than fructose. Some studies are showing it can work. It can mimic GLP-like effect. I don't know more about it, but I would rather, if you're compelled to put something in your tea or coffee, please keep it at the lowest because it's still a processed thing, but it is better than the fructose. Next. And then, of course, my favorite pastime, sit under a palm tree and watch the Atlantic Ocean or Pacific for whatever, and dip in and then just rest under the palm tree, drink a nice cold lemonade or something like that, and just try to relieve some stress. That's why I put it with a smiley face. So thank you for your attention. Now we could take your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. We will. There are already some questions coming through the chat, and I think we can address those before we go into any further details. I would also like to say thank you so much to all the audiences who are here today. So Hafeez, just to very quickly summarize and wrap up of what you've addressed today, you obviously highlighted some of the primary risk factors. Sorry. So you've highlighted some of the primary risk factors that are associated with metabolic syndrome. You've effectively shown us that how insulin resistance contributes to the development of metabolic syndrome and obesity. And you've also shown us how what relationship exists between obesity and insulin resistance in both metabolic and clinical terms. I really appreciate you for taking the time to spend with us today. Some of the questions very quickly, if we go into the chat box, Dr. Kesser Kuyum is asking, does removing fructose from diet means concentrated processed fructose or fruits?
Excellent. Yeah, that's an excellent question. Very good question. And obviously on that food chart that I have, or the lifestyle modification chart, I have allowed the fruits. The reason for that is that not only that the fruits have high fiber in it, majority of them, some more, some less, but if I would start classifying, it will become very cumbersome and difficult. So what I've left is the fruits are allowed. What you could do is with the fruits is basically consume them, and the fructose that are in the concentrated form, obviously in the processed food, is to be removed. The reason for the fruit allowing is that the fruit and vegetables have fiber. Fiber is the food of your bacteria. If you don't feed your bacteria, like I said, they will feed on you, on the mucin layer, and cut it right out and cause the leaky gut syndrome, which we absolutely don't want. It is the most important thing to understand. So excellent question. Please go on with fruits. Find good, healthy fruit sources from local farmers, the best. This way you help them out too. Plus, you know that you're finding good produce. Otherwise, go to wherever your economic situation allows you, make sure that the fruits are in there.
Thank you, Hafiz Bhai. The next question is when performing, this is coming from Mansoura, and she's asking when performing body composition testing, so what should be a set goal for visceral fat? Because I know that you've talked about 3 different fats. One was the outer body, the subcutaneous, and then the organ fat. But visceral fat, how do we measure that? How does it, what goal should we set up for that?
So that's an excellent question, a very good question, very difficult to answer, very expensive to diagnose. Why? Because it requires MRI to be ideal to find out the amount of fat there is in the visceral fat. It should be the least possible because, as you know, around 5 pounds is where the limit is. And if it goes beyond that, it starts secreting inflammatory cytokines, which is very dangerous and inflammatory for our body. So what we need to do is poor man's test is, like I said, waist circumference. Waist circumference is measured not at the belt, but where the last rib ends and where the hip bone comes. Right in the middle is where you measure, and you could make the navel as a reference point and measure it. And if for a female, if it is under 35, you are good. If it is over 40 for men, it is not good. So under 40 for men, under 35 for women. I hope I answered your question. Otherwise, further ask that.
Nasir Saab from Saskatoon is asking, what is your opinion about Ozempic?
Ozempic is, of course, it's a very good drug. It works excellent on the GLP receptors, like it's a GLP receptor agonist, and it works on those multiple areas of the body that we have talked about. But obviously, it is case by case. I cannot do a blanket recommendation because that would not be fair. But if you have a metabolic disorder to the tune of getting a diabetic, pre-diabetic around there, even though the FDA indications are for diabetes only, but make sure that you consult your doctor. But I personally, that's my personal choice as a doctor, I keep the Ozempic dosage lower to minimize or mitigate side effects, and I maximize on the fasting and the diet that I have with the exercise. If you're able to do the 4-walled structure that I've created, that means on one side you have a 7-hour sleep, that's must. On one side you have weight-based exercise, that's must. On one side you have 14 hours fasting, that's a must. And on the other side you have low carbs, high proteins, and high good fats. Then you can work with the lowest dosage of Ozempic, which will answer your metabolic ailment and assist you with weight loss in a very, very nice fashion. And it also will be good to withdraw from the drug once you reach to, by the way, diabetes is a reversible disease. It used to be called it's a chronic disease. It is not chronic disease. It is a reversible disease. Once type 2 I'm talking about, not type 1, but type 2, where you still have the insulin problem. So if you are able to mitigate that, you are good. Next question.
Sadia Ahmed is asking, what do you think about monk fruit extract for sweetener?
I would stay away from it. And the reason is that it's just, I have searched it myself. It is not as good. It's processed, so I would stay away from it. Like I said, I would rather put a local farmer's honey, a small amount, tiny amount, to sweeten if you have a sweet tooth, rather than putting these things. They are not good for our bodies generally. What's the next question?
Samar Khan is asking sugar versus sweetener in tea.
Sugar versus, of course, no sugar. Sugar is not good for you. Use the natural sweet of the milk. If you're putting a whole milk, whole cream, or I like my favorite, and that's my personal opinion. Many people might not agree with me, but I have seen it to be very good, is heavy cream. Heavy cream does not have any carbohydrates, and make sure it says no sugar added. It has its own natural fats in it, which makes it creamier. You use less amount, and it makes it nice taste of coffee or tea that you're able to make use of that. So try using that.
Okay, next question, Jazib Ahmed, he's asking, Salam, Dr. Hafiz. My question was, if one is trying to gain weight, bulk up, I believe he's probably taking some protein shakes as well for that. Is it still harmful to leave less than 4 hours between dinner and sleep?
That is correct. The reason for that is that those proteins that you will be consuming, one of those would be leucine, which is a direct cause of the insulin release from the pancreas directly. That's one of the few proteins that cause it. And as a result of that, once that comes out, the insulin will start looking for the glucose. And once they will find the glucose, it will take it down for fat synthesis, which you do not want. So I would make sure that the 4 hours time is there, and I will make sure that those supplements are being consumed with the exercise. If you're not exercising, stay away from them, please.
Dr. Naveed Haq is not asking a question, but he's made a really keen observation about atrial fibrillation, and he says that it is also now regarded as a metabolic syndrome associated illness. Hyperuricemia is being regarded as a risk factor. AFib incidence rates are increasing, especially in the 60+ age group. Alcohol is a major risk factor as well. Thank you, Jazakallah, Dr.
Thank you.
Naveed, for that
That's
comment.
correct. I totally agree with him 100%. That is the problem. We got to go back to the basics, guys. We got to go back. And especially all of us that are living in these Western countries, I know in the third world countries, it will be shameful. I mean, since I've traveled in third world countries to try to tell them what to eat if they are poor, because they are just surviving. Those are in survival mode. So you cannot even talk about a healthy diet there because their situation is completely different. But in the Western world, we are in a completely different type of predicament. I hope that you guys understand that staying away from these foods is very important.
Jazakallah for that.
Semaglutide next is what?
Semaglutide amounts vary in Ozempic and others like it. What effects, if any, does it have on people? I think you partially answered that question earlier, but if you want to give more details.
Yeah, so there are different type of GLP drugs that are on market. Ozempic is one of them, Wegovy is the other, Zepbound, Mounjaro. These are the modern ones that we have nowadays. Saxenda is a little older, but they have different type of strengths in their pens. But remember one thing, that they have nowadays compounded drugs that are being that have come in, and that was on the name of the availability of the drugs that the industry started coining this, and government gave them the permission. But my own recommendation is stay away from them because they don't have a regulated amount of those, and your body might suffer as a result of excess dosing. There are a lot of doctors that are prescribing them online and giving you for $150 or $200. The problem is they're harmful when they're not being watched by a physician with the tests and everything. So my brothers and sisters that are listening, and those whoever will listen, think about it. Just think about it.
Shazia Suhail Saiba is asking, can traditional Islamic fasting twice a week be substituted for intermittent fasting?
That's an excellent question. I'm not against it. I think it probably should be okay if you are able to do it. The only difference between intermittent fasting and Islamic fasting is that in Islamic fasting, you don't consume even water. And there are variable timings. Like if you are doing it in the winter, you don't even cross 14 hours time frame. And but you are fasting with the water restriction too. And so as a result, when water is deprived and your body feels dehydrated, other than that type of situation, the benefit might be different. I'm not saying, I still might think that there's a lot of wisdom behind that fasting, and I'm not against it. And if you're doing it, kudos to you. Please let us know also how it works for you. I have seen people with success. Intermittent fasting is a completely different phenomenon, different concept than that concept.
Thank you. But Dr. Hafiz, now that we have exhausted all of the questions in the chat, if any members would like to ask questions, please, by all means, you can raise your hand or you can unmute yourself and have a direct conversation with Dr. Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
My question is, what is the best way to get metabolic testing done? How do we search for a provider that does that?
So I'm not, by the way, I'm not a functional doctor. I am an internist, practicing internist that has incorporated functional medicine out of necessity. And I have created those orders that I have put out for the benefit of all of you and for humanity, if they can find a doctor that could write them. But obviously you have to know in these countries, ICD codes that go with it. Otherwise, the insurances would reject them. So it is very important that if you're cash paying, you should be able to find any doctor. But then again, the problem with finding any doctor, that not every doctor might know what those tests are. And as a result, they might be reluctant to order it for you. But there are doctors around that could do it. And if any one of you need my help and they are in the area, or if they want to come to United States to do the test through LabCorp and they want to utilize my help, by all means, go ahead and reach out.
Jazakallah.
No problem.
Any other questions? And I also want to add that अगर आप उर्दू में भी ये सवाल करना चाहते हैं तो प्लीज़ आप अपने आप को unmute कर सकते हैं और उर्दू में भी गुफ्तगू हो सकती है जज़ाकल्लाह।
Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Yes,
Hmm.
go ahead.
People.
You're cutting out. You're cutting out. Say it again, please. I think we lost.
If him is not the main source coming from the milk, then what should they consume?
No, say it again. Your question was like you had a poor connection, so it looked like your question didn't come in right to us.
I'll put in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead. That's good. Yes. Who's next?
जी. Any other questions? So Hafiz bhai, if you don't mind, I'll ask a question. So Hafiz bhai, you've obviously highlighted the fact that we should avoid processed food, and you've also given us some facts at the starting of the conversation where you mentioned that 70% of the food that is available in the US market is processed food.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, I'm looking at it from a very socioeconomic standpoint,
Yes.
that whenever we go and purchase organic food or salads at some of the most familiar places that we go to, you talk about McDonald's, you talk about Chick-fil-A, you talk about all these big brands. So my question is that it's really expensive. It really is. The price difference is almost twice as much, maybe sometimes even more. So how do we reconcile with that? I mean, you've given so many examples of, a poor man's test and poor man's choice. So how do we incorporate those things into our daily lifestyle without making it a socioeconomic burden on some people? Ji.
But excellent question. And you'll be surprised at the lines that we see on McDonald's and on the Dunkin' Donut, and are usually people of the middle to lower socioeconomic class. And they are consuming diets that are extremely dangerous. So what would you rather do? Put a poison on daily basis in your body that will slash 10 to 15 years from your life, and the remaining years after 50 would put you waiting on the waiting room of an internist, or here I have a friend here, Khalid Minas, on his table getting a cardiac cath done. What would you rather do? you rather go in your 30s and do everything in your possible, even if that leads to consumption of a less food compared to these ready-made foods, you will be doing good. And believe me, these foods in airports and on different places, they are very expensive too, compared to the healthy options. So healthy options can be obtained, even though, of course, at some cost, unfortunately. But I would suggest that for your health, you do that. I always say that people spend enormous degree of time to try to gather money for their later years, and they do not spend enough time for their health. So sometimes they have money, but they don't have health to enjoy the money that they gathered. And they leave it for people that sometimes don't even deserve it. So our own health is the biggest gift that we could give to ourselves. So my thing would be that wherever possible, if you're traveling, find those healthy options that nowadays every single fast food chains have those also, and try to look for those that are closest to the natural mark that we have written. It still would be impossible, but lesser would be better than a complete disaster, I would say, right? So I think there is a question here from...
Lactose intolerance is a big problem. What should such people consume? Should we be not concerned about using milk as a source of calcium?
Yeah, milk should never be a source of calcium. You cannot absorb calcium from the milk. That is a wrong assumption, and it is not a good idea. It is consumed for the essential amino acids and fatty acids that milk naturally carries, and obviously in moderation that you should consume. So if you're lactose intolerant, try the lactate supplements, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't have to be consumed. There are other options too that you could take.
Dr. Malik is imploring us to discuss dates as a source of dessert and food.
Absolutely, Dr. Malik, I am very grateful for your question. And absolutely, dates are good. Dates have high fiber. Dates have high fructose. That's true. But like again, I said, that fructose is wrapped with fiber. And what happens that fiber coats your intestine, dragging that glucose down longer time and take it to those 100 trillion bacteria that are waiting. So you are good there. That is, and by the way, those people that are concerned about these kind of foods, wear a CGM and you will have an eye-popping discovery. I myself wore it for 2 eyes. The CGM are the best way, and nowadays they are available OTC also, and they link with your phones, iPhone, and with any other Android, and you're able to see what food you consumed, and if your sugars go above 120 after 75 minutes of consumption, you are in trouble, and avoid that kind of food. So dates, my favorite, and absolutely the best. I consume them. I have them in my car. I have them in my office. I have them in my home. I consume them after my meals, and they're good. And also sometimes consume them with coffee. They are a nice mix, dates and nuts, by the way. Try it instead of using with consuming with cakes that people buy and put it on the Twitter, a cakes picture. Each single picture I see in the tweet with those cakes, I wish that I could go and tell them, please, why didn't you buy nuts? Why didn't you buy dates with it? Nice source. They provide you with the fats, which is very satiating, and a very good source for you as a snack.
So thank you so much, Aviz Bhai, for for making those suggestions. And I think the last few times that you and I have met, I've been very careful not to sit around you and eat, because I didn't want you to see what was on my plate. So,
but you had told me that you're gonna randomly check on me, that if I was violating my own diet.
I did, and you were not, and I was very, very well pleased to see that. CGM has nickel, and it gave me a big allergic reaction. My arm is there an alternative? Yes.
A good question. The Freestyle Libre 3 has come with a very, very small unit. I hope that that might be the answer to your question. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the traditional way to check your sugar 2 hour postprandial will be the only way. But fasting blood sugars is a thing of the past. Please do not chase the fasting blood sugar. That has, your body would do everything in its power to try to keep the fasting sugars in check. So 7 a.m., you would have high cortisol and growth hormone that rise and they keep your sugars down. So 2 hour postprandials or evening blood sugar check is the key to checking if you are in trouble.
Okay. Dr. Malik is also saying, can we share the recording? Yes, we are making this recording and we'll be uploading that on, platforms, Hafiz bhai?
Yes.
Is that okay? All right.
So
And
Dr. Amtul wrote that that was Libre 3. I think she said that the one she wore was Libre 3. And so there is the other one, Dexcom. I don't know if she has tried Dexcom too. That is also, and there is a Level Health. They have their own CGM. If you look for them, maybe that doesn't have a nickel in it. But like I said, if that's not the case, other indicators that only check the fingers with the sensors, they're not that reliable. I would not trust their sugar testing.
okay.
And there is a question here. What is your
Um,
view of consuming? Yeah, go ahead.
Anji, what is your view of consuming whole wheats, oats, millet grains, also cereals? I think I can also add granola bars in there, Hafiz bhai. So what are your views on those?
Those are unfortunately processed, and if you would read on their screen, they would say sugar added, unfortunately, and that is not good. The only problem with these wheat, oats, and these things is that they're highly processed. But if you're able to find a Scandinavian bread, they generally don't put the yeast in it and make it fluffier bread. And the bread is very hard, not hard that you cannot chew it. Those are good. And the steel cut grains, probably they're not bad if consumed with some care. One other thing that some people have asked me, and I have seen that if they are compelled to eat rice, I suggest that rice peel off and then cooking it and putting it in the fridge and consuming it the following day. That complicates the starch structure in it a little bit. And as a result, the ready availability of the glucose to the body gets compromised. And then other thing that you can also do is consume those with high fiber food, like those boiled saute vegetables that can go along with it that have fiber that would drag this or minimize that or mitigate that.
Okay.
Any other question, that live question that somebody has? Let's see if my pharmaceutical friends. Welcome from, yes.
I wanted to ask about gluten sensitivity as well. Do you know, I think that I have heard that the gluten or the wheat in America, because of the GMO, that's why we are developing all these sensitivities. Otherwise, the golden wheat in British, UK, or Pakistan probably does not cause any gluten sensitivity.
That's excellent question. That's true. That observation is correct. So that is, I agree with you on that. And
ये कोई डॉक्टर है ये डाइट वगैरह के
yes, so let's see.
Khalid, Khalid Saab, do you have any questions? Khalid Saab, आपने कोई सवाल करना है?
जी नहीं I'm good, sorry. I'll mute.
All right, thank you.
So let's see if one of my pharmaceutical friends want to ask a question.
Dr. Rehman, it was a wonderful talk. Thank you. I always learn so much from you.
Well, thank you.
I did have a question. I use a lot of avocado oil as a cooking oil. What are your thoughts on avocado oil as far as how they stack up against some of the others?
It's a better option than others. for sure. Not my top priority, but it is, if you compare it with others, seed oils, it is better. So when we are talking in the comparative sense here in this case, because in the cooking, you cannot control the temperature, right? So the temperature rises, especially if you're cooking it on the grill or something. And so that's why you need to be cooking in the heat stable oils, which is better than those that can easily transform into trans fat. So if you are just doing a simple saute, light things, you're good. On that case, even olive oil is good. If you're doing just an egg fry, and people do that, this shouldn't be a problem.
Perfect.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Surprised that you didn't ask about your GLPs, but I think you know about your GLPs very well. So
I hope I do.
Assalamu
No,
alaikum.
thank you so much.
you're welcome. Yes, Michael.
Welcome.
So follow up to an earlier question. Breads made with einkorn, the unmodified wheat, are okay to consume?
Yeah, so the question would be, where would you find them? They are very difficult to find.
But they're available on Amazon.
Yeah, but are they like the fluffier breads, or are they hard breads? That will be
No, they're in either wheat berries or ground flour. It's not made, it's not processed at all. It's just raw. You can get it in its raw form. You'd have to make your own bread.
Yeah, so in that case, obviously you're okay, because that's a completely different scenario, and of course it will be considered a complex carbohydrate, which
Okay. So roti made from einkorn, the traditional way that we grew up with, is absolutely fine.
Yeah, so here is an interesting thing I tell you. I was very pro besan roti, and the other day in an excitement, I went to find a besan roti. So I went to this Indian store, and they said, "Hey, there is the besan roti." Stupid I was, I didn't check the side where it's, like where that area where all the ingredients are written. I brought it home, and I needed my glasses anyway to read it. And when I enlarged it on my phone, it had sugar added, it had so many other things added in it. And so chickpeas bread, very good if you could make it home and you know the ingredients. That will be actually the best because of the natural protein contents in it.
All right. And einkorn as well, right?
Yes, you're okay there with that.
Okay, Jazakallah.
Okay, we're on the mark, Dr. Hafiz, 12:30. So
Okay.
again, we talked about it earlier. If people joined after we had started, that we inshallah do plan to keep this series going. So this is not just a one-time thing. This topic is very vast, and people have all kind of questions. And we would like to get to those questions, and Hafiz, if we can give you trouble you a little bit more in the future, and we can have you come back. So it won't be we'll try to make sure that the momentum keeps going. So we don't want to keep a very large gap in between these talks. So we'll keep everyone posted. We'll be posting the announcements on social media. Please keep an eye out there. We'll be posting them on our personal WhatsApp groups as well, and try to invite as many people as you can. So you guys can be the ambassadors for these talks, and please try to spread the word. So Jazakallah once again, Dr. Hafiz, for your time. Really appreciate it.
And by the way, these dietary recommendations that I did, it will be, so there is some credit to be given. So I mean, I would mention that it's made with the collaboration of my wife, who's a nutritionist, and also a long living diabetic who has kept her diabetes in absolute control. because of the dietary intervention. So with her help, I created that as the most humanly possible basic food model based on macronutrients, which was exceedingly and very difficult because we wanted to make sure that it's nutrient rich and also not causing people to starve. That's not the purpose. If you take the enjoyment out of the life, there is nothing left. There is nothing left. We don't want this at all, the enjoyment to go. We're just saying that give the 25 feet of the real estate in your body some rest so that its cells can regenerate, which is intestines I'm talking about. And that 14 hours is the key element. So if you could take home something, if you are able to do that, and of course, during that time, drink plenty of water. Green tea is a natural appetite suppressant. Drink that during that time. And if you could surpass 14 hours to 15, 16, you are going to do very well. And then later on, maybe in another talk, we could talk about the stretching and some exercises that cause the belly fat to go away. People have talked about it, and it has been something of interest to me and people have asked me, and that might be the next topic that we could talk about, because body has some favorite places to deposit fat, and a careful stretching regimen, if done properly, can create a great deal of health for the body, because you target elongated muscles of the body that are largest muscles in the body. And once they get activated or grown, not only that you avoid sarcopenia, but also you cause the consumption of the extra glucose to your muscles that avoids the insulin resistance. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you indeed. I appreciate Nayyar Bhai for your kindness for
Jazakallah.
moderating that for us. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone, please remember us in your prayers, and we will do the same for you. Eat healthy, sleep wealthy, take care until next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.